Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into some listener-suggested research today, and this one's a doozy. A world where communication isn't about speaking, it's about telepathy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a telepathic society. Forget texting and Zoom calls. Imagine a society built on pure thought.
That's a big one, a complete paradigm shift.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. What would daily life look like in this telepathic world? How would it change everything from the way we learn and work to how we experience art, how we connect with each other, all that good stuff.
It really makes you question some pretty fundamental things about being human, doesn't it? Like
Yeah.
privacy, individuality, even consciousness itself.
Yeah.
How those would change in a world where thoughts are constantly accessible.
Right. Okay, so let's start with something everyone can relate to. Childhood. Imagine growing up in a telepathic society.
Oh, wow.
Right. No baby babble, just pure thought from day one. So what do the sources say about how kids would develop in this kind of environment?
Well, the research suggests that learning would be incredibly accelerated. I mean, can you imagine? A child learning history, not from a textbook, but by experiencing the emotions and sensations of people who actually lived through those events.
Oh, wow.
Right. The depth of understanding would be incredible. And that's not even mentioning the possibilities for creativity and play. I mean, kids could build worlds together with their minds.
That sounds amazing, but wouldn't there be some challenges too? I mean, kids aren't really known for their tact or emotional control.
Right.
So what happens when those unfiltered thoughts are, well, telepathic?
Yeah, you're hitting a crucial point there. The research definitely highlights the potential for emotional vulnerability in telepathic children. They don't have those mental filters that adults use to manage their thoughts, so conflicts could be very intense. Unintentional hurt feelings would probably be pretty common too. In fact, one young telepath in the research, she described it as feeling like everyone knew her secrets, even the ones she didn't want to share.
Oh, wow. That's heavy. Constantly feeling exposed, even as a kid. It makes you wonder how relationships would evolve as these telepathic kids become adults.
It does, and that's exactly what the research delves into, the complexities of adult relationships in a telepathic society.
So no more wondering if your date is actually into you or if your job interviewer is impressed. You just know.
Exactly. The stakes would be incredibly high. Think about it, dating, job interviews, you'd sense every doubt, every reservation.
Talk about pressure, but wouldn't that also kind of remove the mystery, the excitement of those interactions?
That's a good question. It seems like there'd be a trade-off. On the one hand, you'd have the potential for incredibly deep intimacy and understanding, right? Like no more guessing games, just pure, unfiltered connection. But on the other, yeah, it could definitely lead to a lack of personal space, a constant feeling of being evaluated.
It really makes you think about the balance between connection and individuality, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about kids and adults, but what about older generations? How would telepathy impact the experiences of the elderly?
You know, the research paints a pretty poignant picture of aging in a telepathic world. Imagine sharing your memories with younger family members, not through stories, but through direct thought transfer. They could literally experience your life as you lived it.
Wow. That's beautiful. A way to truly pass down your legacy, not just with words, but with actual emotions, sensations.
Yeah. But there's a potential downside, too. As cognitive functions decline, there's a risk of unintentional thought leakage.
Yeah.
Almost like your inner monologue, with all its random thoughts and memories suddenly being broadcast to those around you.
Oh, no.
Yeah, one elderly woman described it as feeling like her mind was an open book, and she had no control over which pages people were seeing.
That's heartbreaking. It really makes you think about the need for privacy, especially for those who are most vulnerable.
It does. And that leads us to the fascinating realm of telepathic technology. The research actually describes some incredible inventions that would be crucial in a thought-based world.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Tell me more. I'm particularly fascinated by these neural amplifiers. How would those work and who would use them?
So imagine that not everyone's born with the same telepathic abilities. Some people might have weaker signals, making it hard to fully participate in a thought-based society, right? Neural amplifiers would boost those signals, basically ensuring everyone has a voice, or rather, a thought, in this new world. It'd be like giving everyone a microphone for their minds.
That makes a lot of sense. Inclusivity would be so important in a world where telepathy is the main form of communication. But wouldn't people also want ways to protect their thoughts, especially in certain situations?
Oh, absolutely. The research talks about the development of mental shielding technology. Think of it like a psychic firewall for your mind.
A psychic firewall.
Yeah.
That's a powerful image. How would these shields actually work?
Well, imagine devices, or even mental techniques, that let you control how much of your thoughts are accessible to others. Maybe you can completely block certain thoughts, or maybe you choose to share only specific information. Kind of like choosing what files to share on a computer network. These shields would be especially important in workplace, where some mental privacy is essential for professional boundaries.
Right, right. In our world, we rely on physical boundaries, social cues to maintain a sense of privacy. But in a telepathic world, those boundaries would be much more fluid, wouldn't they?
Exactly. And that brings us to maybe the most mind-boggling concept in this whole research, the mind net. It's described as this global network that connects thoughts directly.
Hold on, the mind net?
Yeah, like our internet, but instead of sharing information, it's sharing pure thought.
Whoa. Okay, so what kind of impact would this mind net have on daily life? Force for good, something to be feared.
That's the big question. And the research really explores both the potential and the perils. On the one hand, the MindNet could facilitate incredible collaboration and creativity. Imagine working on a project and being able to share ideas, solutions instantly, not through words or diagrams, but pure thought.
That would revolutionize so many fields, from science and engineering to art and music. But what about the potential for mental intrusion or even manipulation?
Exactly. Those are exactly the ethical dilemmas this society would face. Who controls the mind net? How do you prevent unauthorized access to thoughts? And what happens when that line between individual consciousness and collective consciousness starts to blur?
It's exciting, but also a little terrifying to think about. Okay, so we've talked about how telepathy would impact education, relationships, technology. But what about art and culture? Would they be totally transformed in a thought-based world?
Oh, absolutely. The sources describe a world where art becomes totally immersive. Forget static paintings or sculptures. Artists in this telepathic society would create what they call thoughtscapes.
Thoughtscape?
Yeah, basically complex mental constructs that convey not just images, but emotions, abstract concepts, even whole narratives.
So you're not just seeing the art, you're experiencing the artist's entire creative process.
Exactly. One telepathic artist described it as sharing a piece of their soul with the viewer.
Wow, that's intense, but also beautiful. And it would definitely raise a whole other set of questions about how we define art and creativity.
Right. And what about how social norms, etiquette would evolve? Think before you speak takes on a whole new meaning when your thoughts are literally on display.
Oh man, I can just imagine the awkward telepathic silences at parties as everyone's trying to filter their thoughts.
The research actually suggests that they'd have to develop their own unique social customs, like thought-sharing circles, where people take turns broadcasting their thoughts in a structured way so they don't overwhelm each other with constant mental chatter.
That makes sense. Creating a safe space for controlled telepathic interaction. So it seems like this world would require a whole new level of mental discipline and awareness, wouldn't it?
It would. And it would raise some really profound questions about the nature of privacy, individuality, even sanity in a world where our inner lives are constantly accessible. I mean, it really makes you wonder, would people actually thrive in a world with that kind of constant mental transparency? Or would it just be too much? Too much for the human psyche to handle,
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. On the one hand, we've got the potential for incredible intimacy and understanding, like we were just talking about. But on the other hand, yeah, there's the potential for overload, intrusion, maybe even a loss of self. So what did the sources say about, I guess, the psychological and emotional landscape of this telepathic world?
Well, they highlight a whole bunch of potential challenges. Like, for example, imagine the exhaustion of constantly being bombarded by everyone's thoughts and emotions around you. They actually call it thought fatigue, and it sounds, well, pretty debilitating.
I mean, it's like the introvert's worst nightmare. No escape from the constant buzz of other people's minds. I can definitely see how that would lead to, burnout, social withdrawal, all of that.
Exactly. And for people who are especially empathetic, that constant influx of emotions, it could be just overwhelming to the point of actually causing serious distress. They even have a term for it, empathic overload. It's like having your own emotions amplified by everyone else's around you.
Man, that sounds intense. It makes you wonder if people would need, new coping mechanisms, new ways to manage their mental and emotional energy in a telepathic world.
Well, the research suggests that this mental shielding technology would be, well, crucial for that very reason. People would probably need to create their own little psychic safe spaces to get away from that constant mental chatter.
So like a room in your house where you can completely block out all those external thoughts.
Right, exactly. Just be alone with your own mind. Almost like a sensory deprivation tank, but for the mind.
A way to like recalibrate, recharge in a world of constant mental stimulation. Okay, that makes sense. But what about relationships? We talked about the potential for like deeper intimacy, but wouldn't this level of transparency also magnify conflicts?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, imagine every little annoyance, every resentment, every fleeting negative thought just broadcast directly to your partner's mind.
No more simmering in silence.
Right. There'd be no way to hide your true feelings, no way to just sweep those little disagreements under the rug.
Yeah, it would definitely take that whole picking your battles thing to a whole new level. Every argument would be like a full-blown telepathic showdown.
Exactly. And think about the potential for jealousy, possessiveness. I mean, if you can sense your partner's every fleeting attraction to someone else, wouldn't that just breed insecurity and mistrust?
Yeah, it makes you wonder if relationships would actually be more fragile in this kind of world. The stakes would be so much higher when you're constantly aware of your partner's, innermost thoughts and feelings.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? Telepathy could lead to this unprecedented intimacy, but it could also make relationships way more volatile and just more challenging to navigate, and really makes you appreciate the complexities of human connection, even in our non-telepathic world.
It really does. Gives you a whole new perspective on that delicate balance of communication, privacy, trust.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the potential downsides of telepathy.
Yeah.
But are there any, potential benefits, anything in the research that suggests it could actually enhance our lives in a positive way?
There is one aspect that I find incredibly hopeful. It involves the work of this sociologist, Dr. Elena Morales. She made a really groundbreaking discovery about telepathic connections.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What did she find?
So she was studying group telepathic dynamics, and she noticed something pretty remarkable. Telepathic connections actually get stronger when people share common goals or emotions. It's like this mental synergy effect, where the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts.
So if a group of people are working towards the same goal or like feeling the same emotion, their telepathic connection intensifies.
Exactly. And this discovery, it actually led to the development of these devices called unity nodes. They amplify shared thoughts, specifically for collaborative projects. Unity nodes. Okay, tell me more about how these work and what kind of impact they could have.
Well, imagine a team of scientists working on a complex problem. With unity nodes, they could share not just their ideas, but their insights, their intuitions, their entire thought process, all in real time. It would be like merging their minds into a single, superpowered problem-solving engine.
That sounds like it could lead to some incredible breakthroughs. What other applications could unity nodes have?
I mean, the possibilities are pretty much limitless. Think about artistic collaborations, where musicians or dancers, visual artists, they could create these works of art that are truly a fusion of their individual minds. Or imagine a group of people meditating together, using unity nodes to amplify their sense of peace and connectedness.
It's like telepathic meditation, a way to tap into a collective consciousness and experience a deeper level of unity.
Exactly. Dr. Morales herself described telepathy as, and this is a quote, a mirror reflecting our shared humanity. She believes that when we align our minds, we can achieve things that were once thought impossible.
Wow, that's powerful. So even with all the potential challenges of telepathy, there's also this incredible potential for collaboration, for creativity, even like spiritual growth.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that, every new technology, every evolutionary leap, it comes with both risks and rewards. It's up to us as society to decide how we'll use those powers, how we'll navigate the ethical dilemmas, and ultimately, how we'll shape our future.
It makes you think about our own world, doesn't it? We may not have telepathy, but we do have all these increasingly powerful technologies that connect us in ways that were unimaginable just a few decades ago.
Right. And those technologies are raising a lot of the same questions about privacy, about identity, about the nature of human connection. Seems like whether we're talking about telepathy or social media, the fundamental challenge is the same. How do we harness that power of connection without losing ourselves in the process?
That is a profound question, and one that we'll definitely continue to grapple with as technology keeps evolving. But for now, let's shift back to this telepathic world and explore, I guess, how daily life might actually function in a society where thoughts are the main mode of interaction.
Okay, sounds good. Let's start with the workplace. Imagine a world where, meetings are conducted not through spoken words, but through shared thoughts.
No more PowerPoint presentations, no more conference calls, just pure, unfiltered brainstorming, where ideas can flow freely from mind to mind. That sounds incredibly efficient, but also a little intimidating, to be honest.
It would definitely require a different set of skills. Instead of being a good speaker or writer, you'd have to be a clear and focused thinker, someone who can transmit their ideas with a lot of precision and clarity.
And imagine the potential for collaboration. Teams could work together seamlessly, solving problems, developing solutions in a fraction of the time it takes us in our world.
Right, but wouldn't there also be a risk of groupthink? I mean, if everyone's thoughts are constantly accessible, would it be harder to challenge the status quo or to dissent from the majority opinion?
Ooh, that's a good point. Conformity could definitely become an issue. And what about professions that require a certain level of, deception or strategy? How would lawyers or negotiators, even poker players, function in a world where their thoughts are transparent?
Right. It seems like those professions would have to adapt pretty significantly. Maybe developing new techniques for mental shielding or misdirection.
It makes you wonder if telepathy would actually lead to a more honest and transparent society overall, or if it would just create new forms of deception and manipulation.
It's a fascinating question. And speaking of honesty and transparency, let's move on to education. Imagine a classroom where learning happens not through lectures and textbooks, but through direct thought transfer from teacher to student.
Wow. That would completely revolutionize education as we know it. No more struggling to grasp complex concepts or memorizing facts and figures. Students could literally experience the world through the minds of their teachers.
Right. Think about a history lesson where instead of just reading about a historical event, you could experience it firsthand through the memories and emotions of someone who was actually there.
Oh, wow.
Or imagine a science class where you could grasp these complex scientific principles through direct intuition, guided by the mind of an expert.
It sounds like learning would become much more experiential, much more engaging. But wouldn't there also be challenges? What about the role of individual learning styles? The importance of critical thinking?
Those are definitely important considerations. It seems like even in a telepathic world, there'd need to be a balance between direct thought transfer and developing independent thought processes. Teachers would need to guide students not only in absorbing information, but in analyzing and evaluating it critically.
So it's not just about downloading knowledge. It's about developing the skills to process and apply that knowledge in meaningful ways.
Exactly. And that brings us to another really interesting aspect of daily life in this world: socializing and entertainment. Imagine a world where storytelling isn't about words on a page or images on a screen, but about sharing thoughts and emotions directly with an audience.
Wow, that would take storytelling to a whole new level. It's like the ultimate form of immersive entertainment. You're not just passively watching, you're right there in the story, experiencing it alongside the characters.
Right, and think about how that would transform social interactions. Instead of relying on words and body language, you could connect with friends, loved ones on a much deeper level, sharing thoughts and feelings instantly, effortlessly.
It sounds like it could lead to a more empathetic and compassionate society where people are truly in tune with each other's emotions. But wouldn't there also be a risk of losing, I don't know, some of the spontaneity, the excitement of human interaction?
That's an interesting point. Would we become so reliant on telepathy that we lose the art of conversation, the joy of discovering someone's thoughts and feelings through their words, their actions?
It's a delicate balance, isn't it? Telepathy could enhance our connections, but it could also make them feel less, I don't know, less precious, less earned. It's a question that would probably be debated endlessly in this telepathic world.
Just like we're debating it right now, here in our non-telepathic world.
Yeah.
It really is fascinating to think about the potential and the pitfalls of such a radical shift in human communication.
It is. But for now, let's maybe take a step back and consider the broader implications here. What does this all mean for our understanding of consciousness, of individuality, of what it means to be human? I mean, it's really mind-boggling to think about, how different our sense of self would be if we were constantly experiencing the thoughts and emotions of everyone around us. Would we still have that, I don't know, that strong sense of individuality? Or would those lines between self and other, would they just blur?
That's a question philosophers and scientists would probably be debating for generations in that kind of world. I mean, Some might argue that telepathy, it would actually lead to a greater sense of interconnectedness,
Hmm.
more empathy, breaking down those barriers that separate us, creating a more harmonious society. But others might worry that it would erode our sense of, I don't know, personal identity, leading to a loss of autonomy, individuality.
It's almost like that classic philosophical debate about the nature of consciousness, right? Is it inherently individual or collective?
Hmm.
Telepathy would definitely challenge those assumptions we have about where the self ends and the other begins. But let's bring it back to a more, I guess, personal level. If you could choose, would you actually want to live in a world where telepathy was the norm?
It's tempting, isn't it? I mean, to experience that level of connection, to understand others so deeply, to share those thoughts and emotions without the limitations of language
Mm-hmm.
is a really appealing idea.
Yeah.
But I can't help but think about the potential downsides.
Yeah.
That loss of privacy, the constant mental chatter, the vulnerability to manipulation. It's a decision with some really profound implications, and I'm not sure I have a definitive answer.
No, I totally get it. It's a choice that really makes you confront your values, your fears, your deepest beliefs about, I guess, about what it means to be human, right?
It does.
Do we prioritize individuality and privacy? Or do we embrace connection, transparency, even at the risk of maybe losing a part of ourselves?
And it's not a choice we can make on our own. If telepathy were to actually become reality, it would reshape our whole society, our institutions, our very way of life. It would have to be a collective decision, one that requires a lot of careful consideration and a lot of open dialogue about the potential benefits, but also those risks.
This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. It's amazing how exploring a hypothetical scenario like this can really shed some light on our own world and our own values.
I agree. It's a good reminder that even the most futuristic concepts, they often reflect our deepest, anxieties, but also our aspirations as human beings. And it's a good reminder that the choices we make about technology, about communication, they really do have some pretty profound ethical and societal implications.
Well, I think we've covered just about every facet of this fascinating telepathic world. We've explored the implications for childhood development, for relationships, technology, art, culture, even the very nature of consciousness itself. It's been an incredible journey.
It really has. And it's been great sharing this exploration with you.
So before we wrap things up, I'd like to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question. If you could choose to live in a world of spoken words or a world of shared thoughts, which would you choose? And what aspects of your life do you think would be most impacted by that change?
Would you embrace the transparency and connection? Or would you long for that privacy, that mystery of unspoken thoughts? It's definitely something to ponder, especially as we navigate our own increasingly interconnected world.
That's it for our deep dive into the world of telepathy. We hope you enjoyed this exploration as much as we did. Until next time, keep those minds open and curious.